It happened 37,000 feet in the air, where titles vanish, uniforms take over, and assumptions move faster than facts. One minute, a mother was helping her daughter clean up a juice spill. The next, a flight attendant slapped the cup from her hand and told her to leave the plane she owned. Her name is Ava Monroe. She wasn't loud, she wasn't dressed to impress. She didn't mention the boardrooms she commands or the private jet firm she recently acquired. She didn't need to. Until someone decided she didn't belong. This isn't a story about a misunderstanding. This is about what people think they see when they look at someone and what they never bother to ask. Because to that flight attendant, Ava wasn't a CEO. She wasn't even a paying passenger. She was just a problem to remove. But what came next, no one on that flight could have expected. Not the crew, not the other passengers, not even Ava herself. She stood up. She said 6 words, and they changed everything. Before we go on, if you believe stories like this matter, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments what country you're watching from. We'd love to hear your voice in this conversation. And tell us, what would you have done in Ava's Monroe place? Ava Monroe didn't start at the top. She started in a 2-bedroom home in South Carolina, raised by her grandmother, Miss Ruth, who cleaned offices by night and ironed uniforms by day. Ava watched her sacrifice sleep to buy Ava her first graphing calculator. Not because she thought Ava would go to Wall Street, but because she knew she was smart enough to make it there. Ava never chased attention, but attention followed her anyway. Top of her high school class, scholarship to Harvard, MBA with honors. By 30, she'd built a fintech company in her living room that would later go public at $2.4 billion. But Ava's real world doesn't live on headlines. It's Tuesday night spaghetti. It's Janelle's mismatched socks. It's falling asleep beside her daughter while reviewing quarterly reports on her phone with one eye still on the baby monitor. She is a Black CEO, and she's a single mother. Those aren't 2 separate identities. They are threads woven together through every decision, every meeting, every flight she takes, including this one. She didn't travel with security. She didn't bring a personal assistant, just her and her daughter, heading to New York for a board meeting and to celebrate Janelle's birthday with her first Broadway show. They were flying private, yes, but not to flaunt wealth. Ava had recently acquired majority stake in a private aviation firm through her company's parent holdings. It was a matter of time, not status. She dressed simply: jeans, clean white sneakers, a soft green sweater. Her curls pinned up the way Janelle liked them. No designer bags, no heels, just her daughter's favorite snacks and a unicorn backpack tucked under one arm. To the untrained eye, she looked like a regular mom. To those trained only to recognize power by skin tone, wardrobe, or entourage, she looked invisible. But Ava wasn't invisible. She was just underestimated. And that's exactly where the mistake began, because Ava didn't walk onto that jet looking for respect, but she had earned every inch of it. And in a few short minutes, the woman who thought otherwise would find out exactly who she was dealing with. The sun had barely risen over the tarmac at Van Nuys private terminal in Los Angeles. Ava wasn't late. She was never late. Her jet was fueled, cleared, and ready for the 3-hour flight to New York. She'd packed light, 1 carry-on, her laptop, Janelle's unicorn backpack, and a Ziploc bag of strawberries that Janelle had insisted they bring for the plane ladies, just in case they got hungry too. Janelle held her hand tightly. She was excited. First Broadway show. First time flying on a jet that looked like a hotel room in the sky. First time being old enough to remember it all. Ava showed her boarding confirmation at the small security checkpoint, smiled politely at the ground crew, and was led out to the sleek silver aircraft waiting for them. She was used to silence in these moments. No fanfare, no one to greet her with, "Welcome back, Miss Monroe." She didn't expect it. But what happened next wasn't just silence, it was something colder. At the top of the cabin stairs stood Melissa, white, mid-40s, blonde hair tied back tightly, clipboard in hand, smile missing. Melissa had worked in private aviation for over 10 years. She'd flown billionaires, celebrities, heads of state, but when Ava and Janelle stepped onto the aircraft, she didn't see a business mogul and her child. She saw something else. She didn't greet Ava by name, didn't offer to take her bag. Instead, she glanced down the stairs as if waiting for someone else to show up. Then she asked, "Are you here with the client?" Ava smiled patiently. "No, I am the client." Melissa blinked. Her voice sharpened. "You're the one who booked this jet?" Ava nodded. Melissa forced a tight smile. "Well, all right then, let's get you settled." They sat. Ava let Janelle take the window seat. She reached into her tote bag for the strawberries and handed a few to her daughter. Melissa walked by, paused. "Ma'am, no outside food on board," Ava replied calmly. "She's just having fruit." Melissa's response wasn't loud, but it had weight. Rules are rules, even for guests. Ava didn't reply. She looked down at her daughter instead. That moment should have passed, but it didn't, because Melissa didn't stop there. 10 minutes into the flight, Ava politely asked if Janelle could have orange juice. Melissa brought it in a paper cup, no straw, no tray, then walked away without a word. Janelle looked confused. "Is she mad at me?" she whispered. Ava tucked a curl behind her daughter's ear and smiled. "No, baby, she just doesn't know who we are." She didn't mean famous, she meant human. Janelle reached for Ava's hand, tears welling. "It's okay," Ava whispered. She grabbed napkins, leaned over to blot the spill before it could soak the seat. That's when Melissa came storming down the aisle. "Excuse me, you can't touch the cabin surfaces with personal items. That's a maintenance issue." Ava raised her eyes. "I'm just trying to clean up." Melissa's face tightened. Her voice rose. "This isn't a commercial flight. This isn't Coach. If you want to behave like that, you can book elsewhere." Then she reached forward and slapped the cup out of Ava's hand. The silence was immediate. Janelle froze. Her bottom lip trembled. Melissa took a step back, pointing toward the door. "Get off this jet." She said it like a command, as if Ava was trespassing, as if ownership and presence could be decided by uniform and skin tone. But Ava didn't yell, didn't raise her hands, didn't defend herself. She simply stood up, gently moved in front of her daughter, and said 6 words, "Go get your captain. Right now." Melissa stared at her like she hadn't heard right, then scoffed. "You don't get to make demands." But Ava didn't flinch, because Melissa still didn't understand. She hadn't slapped a passenger. She had just slapped the woman who owned the plane. Melissa didn't apologize. She didn't ask questions. She doubled down. "You're being aggressive," she snapped. "You are not allowed to touch crew property." She pointed at the crumpled napkins in Ava's hand like they were a weapon. Ava stood still, napkins dripping with orange juice, lips pressed together. The seat was wet. Her daughter's knees were soaked, but that didn't matter, not to Melissa. And then, it happened. Melissa reached forward again, this time faster. She slapped the cup from Ava's hand with a flick of her wrist and a look that said, "I'm in charge." It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent enough to leave a bruise. But it was deliberate, and it was in front of Ava's 9-year-old daughter. Janelle's bottom lip trembled. Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She just looked up at her mother, waiting. Ava didn't move right away. She blinked once, looked down at the cup, then at her daughter, then back at Melissa. Then she stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just upright. She folded the napkins, set them aside, and calmly said 6 words. "You'll want to call the captain." Melissa blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Ava said quietly. "Get your captain." Melissa's expression shifted from hostility to confusion to something that looked like fear. "Ma'am, I'm not obligated to." "I suggest you do it," Ava interrupted. "Right now." Because what Melissa didn't know was that Ava didn't just charter this flight. She didn't borrow it. She didn't book it through an agent. She owned it. Or rather, her holding company did, along with the plane, and the one before that, and the one after. The jet crew, including Melissa, worked for a private aviation service that had recently merged with a firm Ava quietly acquired 2 quarters ago. Her signature was on their contract. Her name, Ava Monroe, was printed on a plaque in the corporate office Melissa had never visited. But Melissa hadn't cared to check that morning. All she saw was a black woman in jeans flying alone with a child. And to her, that didn't equal ownership. That didn't look like wealth. That didn't deserve respect. Melissa finally walked to the front of the plane and knocked. The door opened. The captain turned to her, confused, then glanced down the aisle, eyes landing on Ava. Then, a shift. He stood up, walked down the aisle toward Ava, nodding respectfully. "Miss Monroe," he said, "is there an issue here?" Melissa's face drained of color. It took exactly 7 seconds. That's how long it took for the balance to shift. Once someone recognized Ava for who she actually was. Melissa stammered. I didn't know. Ava cut her off. I'm not interested in excuses. I'm interested in solutions. The captain turned to Melissa. I need you to step into the service galley and remain there. Now. She opened her mouth again, but stopped. Her eyes flicked to the cockpit, then to the cabin door, then back to Ava. And then she disappeared. Janelle finally exhaled. She leaned against her mother's arm and whispered, Are we going home? Ava shook her head gently. No, baby, we're just getting started. Ava didn't rush. She didn't demand. She simply turned and walked, calmly, deliberately toward the cockpit. Melissa stood frozen halfway down the aisle. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. It was as if her brain hadn't caught up to what was happening. As if she'd only just started to wonder, who is this woman? The captain looked up from the control panel. He blinked, then smiled. Miss Monroe, he said. Good morning. He stood, straightened his jacket, reached out his hand. Melissa, still standing near the galley, heard it. And her face, Naomi's voice drops, drained of all color. That's when the truth hit her. She hadn't just insulted a passenger. She hadn't just slapped a mother in front of her child. She had humiliated a woman whose name was on her paycheck. Ava kept her tone even. There's been an incident in the main cabin, she said. I'd like it addressed, immediately. The captain asked no questions. He simply nodded. Understood. I'll handle it. He followed her back through the aisle. Stopped halfway. Looked directly at Melissa. May I speak with you in the service galley? He asked. Melissa glanced around. There were no allies here. No one to co-sign her outrage. Once inside, the door closed behind them. Melissa started fast. Panicked. Her voice clipped too loud for a small space. She was aggressive, non-compliant, touching equipment, raising her voice. The captain interrupted her. There are cameras in the cabin, Melissa, audio included. Silence. And based on what I've already seen, he continued, you're done for this flight. Melissa's mouth opened again. But now it trembled. Her words stumbled. I didn't know who she was. That's the problem, he said, and that was it. No press conference, no dramatic announcement, just a quiet correction of power behind a closed door. Melissa emerged moments later, pale and shaking. She walked past Ava without eye contact, took her seat near the back of the jet, removed her name tag, and stayed silent. Back at her seat, Ava took out a storybook and opened it on the tray table in front of Janelle. Where were we? She asked softly. Janelle beamed, turning pages. Chapter 3. And that's how the flight continued. Quiet, focused, unbothered. But the consequences, they were only beginning. You see, 6 months earlier, Ava's holding company had quietly acquired a 52% stake in Stratosphere Aero, a luxury private aviation firm that serviced over 2,000 elite clients and employed more than 300 crew members. The deal had gone mostly unnoticed by the press. Ava didn't do loud victories. She preferred silence, control, strategic movement. But tucked deep inside those acquisition papers was an important clause. Any staff member found guilty of discriminatory behavior toward clients or stakeholders could be terminated without board approval. And Melissa? Melissa had just checked every box. Flash on screen, acquisition signed. Ava Monroe Holdings secures majority in Stratosphere Aero. Ava didn't say a word about the acquisition on that flight. She didn't need to. But when they landed in New York, 2 hours later, an internal alert had already reached the company's VP of operations. By the time Melissa removed her headset and stepped off the plane, a termination letter was waiting for her on her company tablet. Melissa appealed, claimed she didn't know, claimed she was provoked, claimed she didn't mean to offend anyone. But the footage showed something different. It showed a child, confused and crying. It showed a black woman being spoken down to, dismissed, and finally assaulted, all while remaining calm. And that's the part that caught the board's attention. Not just the slap, but the way Ava never lost her grace. Because Ava didn't lead with her power, but she never forgot she had it. Power, to her, wasn't loud. It didn't come in shouting matches or security details. It came in silence, in structure, in the systems she built to make sure no one else would have to answer that kind of question again. Are you here with the client? Back in New York, Ava did what she came to do. She chaired the quarterly meeting. She presented a plan to expand her fintech operations into underserved communities. And she took Janelle to that Broadway show, front row center. No headlines, no lawsuits, no press conferences. But quietly, internally, at Stratosphere Aero, things began to change. Mandatory anti-bias training, new hiring oversight protocols, anonymous passenger review audits. Melissa's name? Never spoken again in company meetings. But Ava's? It echoed in every cabin after that. What happened on that flight wasn't meant to be public. Ava hadn't planned to speak about it. She'd handled it quietly, firmly, just like everything else. But truth has a way of surfacing, and sometimes it doesn't knock, it uploads. A crew member, someone who had witnessed the entire exchange, had captured audio from the in-cabin security feed. Just 17 seconds, no video, just sound. The slap, the silence. Ava's calm voice saying, "You'll want to call the captain." It was posted anonymously. Then it hit Twitter. Within hours, the clip had been shared over 200,000 times. By morning, the hashtags had taken over. It wasn't just a trending moment, it was a cultural mirror. Because people weren't just reacting to this slap, they were responding to every microaggression, every judgmental glance, every time someone was asked to prove they belonged. The comment sections exploded. "I've been profiled at airports too. She stayed calm for her daughter, that's strength. I hope that flight attendant never works again. This is why we film everything." But not all voices were supportive. Some tried to twist the story, claimed Ava had been disrespectful, claimed the rules apply to everyone, claimed the crew was just doing their job. They hadn't seen the footage, but they didn't need it. For them, the idea that a black woman could own a jet was still unlikely, unfamiliar, unbelievable. Because for some people, the problem isn't the behavior. It's who dares to exist in certain spaces. And then Ava spoke. No media tour. No apology for how she looked or what she wore. No backtracking, just one statement. Posted quietly to her company's website and social media. Dignity shouldn't depend on your wardrobe or your skin tone. Not at 37,000 feet, not anywhere. She didn't name names. She didn't escalate. She didn't need to. Her words traveled faster than any jet could. LinkedIn, Instagram, business blogs, advocacy groups, CEOs reposted it, athletes shared it. Even a former US senator quoted her on air. It became more than a story. It became a symbol. Because in a world where so many are told to stay calm, stay quiet, and don't cause trouble, Ava showed what it looks like to remain grounded and still make the ground shake. She didn't clap back, she didn't scream, she didn't film it. But her silence on that flight and her voice after spoke volumes. Back at her office, her assistant showed her the metrics. Over 12 million views. 1,000 new clients. Hundreds of job applications, specifically from women of color who said, "I want to work somewhere like that." And the aviation company? They released their own statement. Carefully worded. They cited breach of conduct and internal review outcomes. Melissa's name was never mentioned. But everyone knew. Because when a company protects the system that hurt you, that's a headline. But when they remove the person who thought they could disrespect you and keep their job, that's a message. The investigation didn't take long. The facts were clear. There were audio logs, 2 written statements from crew members, and a timeline that couldn't be twisted. Melissa had violated 3 internal policies: disrespectful conduct toward a client, failure to de-escalate, and physical contact initiated without cause. Her termination was swift, and this time, public. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the message was. Melissa said she didn't know who Ava was. But maybe that was the problem. She didn't care who she was. To Melissa, Ava wasn't someone worth treating with dignity. She wasn't the woman who signed the checks. She wasn't a leader, a mother, or even a client. She was just invisible. That's the kind of power racism hides behind. The kind that masks itself as policy, as protocol, as just doing my job. But this time, there were consequences. Ava never celebrated it. She didn't post a gotcha video. Didn't record Melissa's exit or demand a press apology. That wasn't her way. But she understood the weight of the moment. 3 weeks later, Ava made a quiet announcement of her own, one that didn't trend, but hit much deeper. She redirected her entire quarterly dividend, $1.2 million, into a legal defense fund for travelers of color who face discrimination in transit spaces. Airports, trains, and private carriers. No news crew was invited. No red carpet, just a press release with 3 sentences. It wasn't about the slap anymore. It was about the systems that allow people like Melissa to assume, to question, to punish people for simply existing where they don't expect them to be. A month after the incident, Ava took the stage at a major business ethics conference in Chicago. The theme: Power, Identity, and Silence in Elite Spaces. The ballroom was filled with CEOs, policymakers, corporate attorneys, all dressed in their polished uniforms of authority. But Ava didn't wear that day's uniform. She wore the same soft green sweater from the flight, her natural curls, no makeup. She didn't speak about profit margins. She didn't rattle off statistics. She spoke about silence and how it's used against people who look like her. She talked about how Black travelers are more likely to be questioned about their ticket, more likely to be asked to show ID twice, more likely to be told they're in the wrong place before anyone checks the manifest, and how too often they remain calm just to stay safe. Ava's voice: I've built a billion-dollar company, but I still get asked if I'm the nanny when I board with my daughter. There was no applause during the speech, just stillness. She ended with this: power means being able to choose silence, but justice means choosing to speak. After the conference, 2 CEOs pulled out of contracts with Stratosphere's competitors. One airline launched a third-party discrimination audit. A major law firm offered pro bono support to Ava's Travel Justice Fund. It wasn't viral, it wasn't loud, but it was movement. And that's how Ava moved the world, inch by inch. Back at home, Janelle didn't fully understand what had happened. She only knew that the woman who scared her was gone, and that her mom had made things right. Ava never spoke about Melissa again. Not at the boardroom, not in interviews, not even in private. She didn't have to. Because when dignity is restored, when the system actually responds, there's nothing left to prove. Not when the story speaks for itself. What if Ava hadn't owned the plane? What if she hadn't been a CEO? What if she'd been just a teacher, flying with her child for spring break? Or a nurse heading home after 3 night shifts? What if there had been no cameras, no witnesses, no title behind her name? Would anyone have believed her? Would she have even made it to New York? Because here's the truth. Ava Monroe's story isn't rare. It's just the one you heard about. According to federal transportation reports, Black airline passengers are 3 times more likely to be removed from a flight without documented justification. 3 times. Not for threatening behavior, not for safety violations, but for making someone uncomfortable, or simply for not fitting the image of who's supposed to be there. These aren't isolated incidents, they're patterns. I want to tell you about Deshaun, a 26-year-old engineering student from Detroit. He was flying back from a robotics conference, wore a hoodie, carried a laptop bag. He says he was removed from the flight because he looked anxious. No disturbance, no confrontation, just silence. And then security. He missed his graduation, no apology. And then there's Latrice, a mother of 4 from Georgia. She was flying to New Jersey to visit her sister. She asked for a seat change because of turbulence. She was labeled disruptive by the crew, despite not raising her voice. Escorted off the plane before takeoff, while her children watched. They were all under 10. Neither of their stories made the news. They didn't own stock in aviation companies. They didn't have hashtags or headlines. They had silence. But their pain was no smaller than Ava's. Their humiliation, no easier to explain to a child. That's the thing about racism in elite spaces. It's rarely loud. It wears a uniform. It smiles tight. It says, "I'm just following policy." It tells you to calm down, then calls you aggressive. It doubts your ticket, then says you're overreacting. It slaps without leaving a mark, but it teaches your children a lesson you never wanted them to learn, that success might protect your money, but not always your dignity. This story, Ava's story, is not an outlier. It's the tip of an iceberg no one wants to name. It's what happens when someone decides the way you look cancels out the respect you've earned. It's what happens when a flight attendant forgets that her job isn't to judge who belongs, but to serve with professionalism to every passenger. Every single one. And it's what happens when silence meets power. Because if Ava hadn't spoken, if the audio had never leaked, Melissa would still be flying. And Ava's name would be forgotten by everyone, except her daughter. So no, this wasn't about a paper cup, or spilled juice, or airline policy. It was about what happens when your presence gets treated like a problem, even when you've paid for the whole plane. This wasn't just about Ava. It never was. Ava Monroe never raised her voice. She never threatened to sue. She didn't demand Melissa's resignation in front of cameras. She didn't post videos or deliver a media soundbite designed to go viral. She didn't need vengeance. She chose impact. She chose to protect her daughter's peace before defending her ego. She chose to let her actions, not her anger, speak. And she chose silence when it was strategy, then chose her voice when it mattered most. That's what power looks like, not the kind that intimidates, the kind that doesn't flinch. In the end, this story isn't about a slap. It isn't even about one flight attendant or one woman on one jet. It's about what we do when dignity is challenged. It's about the choices we make when no one is watching. Or worse, when everyone is watching and still expects us to stay silent. Ava didn't just change the outcome of a flight, she shifted the culture of an entire company. And she reminded us all that belonging is not something we should have to prove. Not with credentials, not with titles, not with calmness, and not with wealth. It should be enough to show up, to exist, to love your child and want her to sit beside you without being taught that her place is negotiable. In the wake of it all, Ava returned to her quiet life. She built more, gave more, raised her daughter with the kind of grace that doesn't get celebrated on magazine covers. She didn't want to be a symbol, but she knew that her silence, if left unchecked, would have cost others more than it cost her. And so, she chose hope. She chose action. She chose all of us. If this story moved you, share it. Not because it's shocking, but because it's true. Subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ for more true stories about injustice, resilience, and quiet revolution. And in the comments, have you ever experienced or witnessed racism while traveling? Tell us where you're watching from. Your story matters too, because the more we name it, the less power it holds. And maybe one day, no one will have to be Ava, because everyone will already know we all belong.